Welcome to the Elevate podcast, brought to you by the Registered Master Builders. Each week we explore the ideas and practices that help us get the best from our businesses, our teams, and ourselves. I'm your host, Ryan Castle. We talk to experts, advocates, and business owners in the construction industry to share their knowledge, insights, and experiences to help you build a better business and enjoy a better life. Now let the business building begin. Tony, welcome along to the Master Builders Elevate podcast. Fantastic to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm delighted to be here.
And Tony, we're going to talk all things about Payapps, your company. We're going to talk construction. We're going to talk about making construction a whole lot better. But just before you wave your magic wand right across the construction sector and make it a whole lot better every day, how about we let the listeners know a little bit about you? So some fast fact questions for you.
Sure.
Are you a breakfast or dinner guy?
I'm a breakfast guy.
What was on the menu this morning?
Today was eggs on toast, a little bit of a side with jam, and some chocolate milk as a recovery drink. And we'll probably get into training a little bit later on.
Sounds good. Alrighty. On holiday, would we likely find you on the end of a bungee cord, or would you be cruising nicely on the pool lounger with a cocktail?
Bungee jumper for sure. Have had a crack at it a few times, mostly certainly in Australia.
Okay.
More scary than parachuting to me, quite frankly.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think when you come out of the plane, everything seems so far away. There's no sense of the ground rushing up towards you, but bungee jump things are pretty real, pretty quick.
Exactly. I did mine with AJ Hackett, who is a compatriot of yours. And it was my first one and my second one and my third one. It was good fun.
Okay. Reading, do you like electronic version or do you like the real thing? Do you like the real book?
A bit of both, but increasingly electronic more because it doesn't disturb she, her must be obeyed as I'm reading at night. But I do like the tactile feel of reading a book and flicking pages, quite frankly. And I've got a great book at the moment around how we can cross over the performance attitude of athletes into business. And I deliberately got it in hard copy just so I could actually sit and ponder that one.
Do you recall the title off the top of your head?
No, I'll have to give that one a bit later. Performance Attitudes of Athletes in Business, I think it's called, but okay. I'll send it through.
Yeah, it seems to be a real, almost a genre of books at the moment, understanding how do you, that high performance that they create in sport or focus so much on in sport, how you bring that into the business world. There seems to be quite a lot of books coming through in that zone.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I think we like to think that we can help sport understand how business is run, but from the mind of the athlete and some of the single-minded attitudes that you see from athletes, and how we can probably translate that into sales, marketing, and other aspects of our business. That's quite extraordinary.
Indeed. We've always encouraged all the leaders we work with to also be pursuing a personal goal of significance outside of their work life. One, obviously, because it helps with the balance, but I think the skills that it teaches, you've just talked about resilience, planning, preparation, overcoming obstacles. Those are all things that we use in our business life as well. So we kind of like practicing those skills personally, and we can deploy them in business. It works both ways.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, that was a lovely little segue, and I'm sure we'll come back to it. Cats or dogs?
Dogs. I'm not a fan of cats. I've got. We had 3 Labradors actually, and a cat. The cat was my wife's. The Labrador was my mine. And I'll absolutely rotate towards them every single time.
Yep, we're on a par there. Let me have a stab in the dark here. As a triathlete, you're a early riser more so than a night owl?
Absolutely. I'm trying to get to bed early. I think in triathlon, they talk about 4 disciplines, which is swim, bike, run, plus nutrition. I add sleep as much as possible to try and give, at my age, doing what I'm doing, sleep is critically important. So trying to get to bed early is super, super important. I don't always succeed, but absolutely early riser and enjoy being up with the sun.
Yeah. First triathlon coach I had helped me to understand you're actually only improving as an athlete when you're resting. So
Yes.
you put your body under strain. It's only when you're resting that it grows, more muscle fibers and all those kind of things to help you be better, faster, quicker. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's a good lesson to know, that one, that
it
rest is
is.
just as important as the training piece.
It is.
Alrighty, when you're not solving the world's construction problems, or swimming, biking, or running, and you had the opportunity to watch a movie, would it be a thriller or a comedy?
It's always going to be a thriller for me. But I've got a soft spot for movies like Remember the Titans. I don't know if you've seen Remember the Titans, but I've probably seen that about 20 odd times. The feel good stories that go with it. The last series I watched, I have to say, was Ted Lasso, which was just such a really, really nice story. But, if I want a movie which is going to sort of capture me, it's always a thriller.
That was an interesting change of direction there, Tony. I thought you were going to say you've got a soft spot for rom-coms where you like to sit on the couch and like pet your wife's cat or something. No, didn't
No,
happen.
no.
Already, Tony, on the podcast, we love to get straight to some value adds for people and
Sure.
some insight into what we're going to talk about. Um, in the When we think about the construction, some of the challenges that are going on around it, and the opportunities for improvement, can you share with us your top three insights in that zone?
Yeah, for sure. I think the what's happening in construction has been somewhat tempered by what's going on around us from a pandemic point of view, albeit the pandemic's forced organisations to think very, very differently. So, and that includes how we use technology to improve what we do on a day-to-day basis. The big things for us, though, what we see are around the shift in supply chain in particular, and how organisations are dealing with that. By supply chain, we talk about raw materials, and we also talk about people as well. In terms of raw materials, we can see that there has certainly been increases in the cost of goods, for sure. But there's also been, because of the inability to travel, we're not seeing labour and other people come into the country. And we're not seeing expertise come into the country as well. So it's a finite pool of resource that we're able to apply to solve some of those resourcing problems, which is quite interesting. I think also there's been some generational shifts in our world as well. To be fair, many construction firms are led by their founders. You are seeing new generations of leaders come through who have different ideas and different ways to approach things. And it's about how we can, make sure we don't lose what the past has been from a success point of view for many of these organisations, but embrace the new and the new thinking that comes along with that. I think also probably, the last piece then would be how we look at risk as an opportunity. In other words, rather than seeing risk as a preventer of how we move forward, it's perhaps how we manage and mitigate that. Perhaps using technology and better communication and collaboration to ensure that as businesses and organisations in construction, they're allowed to work far more collaboratively with their stakeholders up and down their supply chains.
Okay. Tony, for context and understanding for the listeners, maybe can you just give us an overview of Payapps? What is it that Payapps does, and who do you typically work with?
Sure. Payapps is a software platform that promotes collaboration between builder and subcontractor on their progress claims. Most of those progress claims in the past, and many still do, are done in a very manual way. They might be done within Excel, they might be written on bits of paper, they might be done in Word. They have inconsistent formats, and they're not a living document. And that's very, very critical, especially as it relates to New Zealand and things like tiered retention. The sort of organisations we work with are builders, large, medium, and small, and subcontractors, across the board. The builders in the large space, we're typically organisations that are structured very normally around, they have IT functions and commercial functions and all sorts of back office functions that help them grow and drive their business. The medium and smaller organisations would be probably a little bit more agile in that space. And our subcontractors will be often one-man bands up to larger organisations that contain many of the different skills and trades that support the builder in their pursuit of building either residential, commercial, or civil projects around the world.
Got it. Thank you for that. Okay. So we've often heard the term around construction that construction companies win small because they're often operating on very tight margins, but
Mm,
they can also lose big. So when a
yeah.
project goes bad, it can go very bad, and to the
Mm.
point that we've actually seen, organisations in bankruptcy, etc. So it'd be fair to say that you're helping with making sure that people continue to win and that all the stakeholders are winning in the relationship. Is that part of the zone you play?
That's that's absolutely the intent. We've seen certainly in both markets across Australia and New Zealand an increasingly competitive market for the construction firms themselves. So what that creates pressure on them. At the back end of it, as I've just talked about, the supply chain challenges increase the challenge at the back end, and so they're squeezed in the middle a little bit. And so they've got to think differently how they can adapt their business to remain profitable, remain healthy, keep their people gainfully employed, and be competitive in the market. So, a part of our role is to help them with that. We certainly focus on how we can promote and very effective collaboration up and down that supply chain, and I think we go, a small way to helping them improve their businesses and help them grow.
Okay. We see a real shift for organizations when their mindset as a construction company changes from we build things to we are building a business, and what
Mhm.
we happen to do is we build things. So I imagine the organizations that you're connecting with are the ones that are starting to very much think in that how do I build a better business here that happens to be in the construction zone. And you mentioned at the outset that you felt supply chain transformation was a huge opportunity for the industry. Can you dig a little deeper into that for us? Maybe for we might have some listeners that are unfamiliar with the supply chain as a term. So maybe if you could just give us your definition around that, and then let's explore some of these opportunities to improve that you see in that zone.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think what goes into building, let's say a building, there's a whole bunch of raw materials that are associated with that, but also on the periphery of the building work. So raw materials might be steel, it might be timber, it might be concrete, for example. It also includes things like diesel that powers the vehicles that the organisations are using to get it around. All of those have been impacted by shortages, in some respects, some quite dramatically, some not so dramatically. But what it has done across the board is, created a challenge around increased cost for the builder and a slowdown in their ability to get those raw materials. So, use an example. If there's a timber shortage and it creates obviously an increase in price. We when we go and build a building, we anticipate or project how long that's going to take to build. These supply chain challenges can often, elongate the time to build, creating tension, amongst the stakeholder base, because there's typically going to be an owner or a developer, there's going to be a builder, and there's going to be subcontractors. So that creates that tension in the market that, organizations have got to find their way around, not just working with, but also solving for at the same time.
Sounds good.
Did I
And
answer it okay?
yeah, it
Yeah.
did. No,
Yeah.
absolutely spot
Good.
on. And look, you see the flow and effect of so many of these supply chain
Mm.
challenges. Was talking with a construction company last week, and they were saying, impacts to things like timber availability.
Yep.
We're increasing the not only is that timber going up in cost, so that's putting price pressure on the project depending on how it's
Yep.
been contracted, but it's also increasing the timeline because the availability wasn't there, so timelines are
Correct.
being pushed out. But then the flow-on effect is then simple things which they made me think about, things like temporary fencing around the site needs to be rented
Correct.
for longer, the
That's right.
portaloo needs to be rented for longer,
Yep.
all those kind of things. So the
That- that-
downstream effect is massive.
That's correct, and that's where we use the term variations because many of these projects are fixed price, and so when they're fixed price and they've made either an estimation or they've got quotes from their supply chain on those raw materials, and when they change, it creates additional pressure on the builder in particular to work on how they're going to vary. And And those variations, which we support obviously through the collaboration and the platform, critically important in making everybody whole in the process.
Okay. I understand that Payapps, in conjunction with Frost and Sullivan, who are
Yep.
some industry analysts in construction, you've done some research with them and you identified some big shifts that were coming in that kind of supply chain zone. Can you
We did.
share some of the insights that you uncovered in that research?
Yeah, there was 5. So the work we did with Frost and Sullivan was around identifying the construction workplace of the future, which I think was critically important, not just for us, but for the industry. We know, not just with COVID, obviously, but clearly it had an impact on it, but the workplace that is in and around construction is fundamentally changing. You know, from a top 5 point of view, supply chain and overcoming the roadblocks associated with that was right at the top of the list. New materials being, you know, alternatives to what might be the norm, alternative type materials to, you know, perhaps solve either those supply chain challenges or perhaps add some efficiency to the process, pretty important. Off-site construction where we, as we're building buildings and frames and trusses and those sorts of things, as much as possible, built in a more efficient process off-site than, you know, transported to site, perhaps would be a good example of that as well. The employee base, you know, the people in and around construction have, you know, various needs, obviously, and the requirements of those people and what they get out of their employment, as well as the role that they play and the career aspirations they have, are also changing. And then I think the final piece is around our environment and sustainability. So are we building more sustainable buildings moving forward? How much of an impact does that have on us and the cost of doing business as well? You know, it's okay to say we're environmentally friendly, but does that then also have then a downstream impact on how much it actually costs, you know, to produce that environmentally, you know, friendly building? So there are the sort of like the top 5 that popped out of our report that were incredibly important, but gave great insight into what's happening in our industry.
And all of those, they end up overlapping or interlocking, don't they? Because you see
They do.
things like, if we can build more efficiently components of a building off-site, we tend to get things like reduced waste. Therefore, we're actually building more sustainability because we're not putting more into landfill, as an example of building
Correct.
waste. I think I may have this number wrong, but I think something like 7% of New Zealand's landfill is construction waste.
Mm.
So if we can impact those kind of things, it'd be really significant.
Oh,
That
massively significant, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about the IT infrastructure that
Yep.
maybe some organizations are using,
Yep.
particularly around construction claims, which
Yep.
is your sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
I was slightly disappointed when you were talking about the ways that they were delivered, being, spreadsheets or back of the envelope, that there wasn't someone had written it on a 4x2 and sent it over.
Well,
Um,
it's highly likely that is still going on. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad was a carpenter,
Yep.
and the number of very important pieces of information that I've cited written on bits of 4x2 were pretty significant. But to
Yep.
be fair, his building career was a wee while ago. Talk to us about what you're seeing in the digital zone around being able to
Yeah.
manage construction claims, because it's such a point of contention.
It
It
is.
can add. When it's done well, it can just help with relationships, it can help with cash flow, it can help with a whole lot
Yep.
of things. When
Yep.
it's done badly, it has the absolute opposite effect.
It does.
Relationships are ruined, time zones are killed, cash flow can be crushed. So give us some insight into how you're helping in that zone.
Absolutely. I think I could probably start with, I think the industry gets a bad rap around the digital transformation and the adoption of technology. And I think sometimes it's a bit unfair. So we see, you know, IT projects succeed and fail in all sorts of industries. And I don't think construction is alone when that happens. Most organizations will have some form of construction management platform, you know, and whether that's around estimation, project management, moving into the financial side, most organizations have that, large, medium, and small. So they've seen and have gone through that process of implementing something that will help them create a little bit more efficiency around that. Side by side with that, then, you know, the collaboration around the progress claim became a manual problem that we solved using technology. And as we stated, it's probably still on, you know, bits of 2x4 or or anything like that, including other technologies. But ultimately, what would transpire is the organisations see the financial aspect of their business being the most critical piece, the progress claim being not as important. But ultimately, as we see all the things we've been talking about so far on the podcast, creating a little bit more complexity for both builder and subcontractor, the ability to have these live documents where they can collaborate around what's happening in their world relative to the work they're doing, how to update their activities and so on, and their work they're doing around in each activity within the contract, and then providing opportunity for variations, providing opportunity to perhaps mitigate some of their risk is become more and more important to them. Now, it's not just about cost efficiency, where, clearly by implementing a solution like Payapps, you create a cost efficiency opportunity. It's about managing risk in the process as well. So, the ability to get paid for a subcontractor is critically important. We know that security of payments is super important to all organizations in that supply chain. So we help to manage and mitigate that as a natural part of the platform. We think also that when you look at the issues around compliance, so how do we make sure that we're delivering on our promise each and every time? Platforms like Payapps help to improve that. We talked about supply chain. We talked about that whole collaboration angle and how we can perhaps remove some of the angst around some of these issues starting to come about from issues within supply chain. I talked about the fact that projects are being delayed or being elongated. I talked about costs rising in the back end for them. The ability to manage the variations becomes critically important within that live document. I think also things like liability and how we can make sure we reduce project risk by, being able to get a complete view of the project all the way through then becomes, not just important to the receivers of the invoice, the subcontractor, but also to the builder as they start to, predict and forecast where they're going to be in any particular time. And I think that final point then is about creating efficiency in the payment cycle as well for people, which is, we don't guarantee people get paid on time. You can never probably say that, but certainly what we will do is give them the best opportunity to be paid on time. We also talk about how cash is super important to many of these organizations, large, medium and small, and preservation of cash is super important. Creating efficiency in that payment process then becomes critically important.
Indeed. And there's been, particularly in the New Zealand setting, the master builders in New Zealand have been doing a lot of work to really try to reshape the industry and get people working together so we get more win-win situations, rather than, I guess, typically we've seen an outcome where people have gone potentially into a tender process. They've absolutely lowballed the offer to try and win the contract.
Yep.
He laughs with familiarity. And then they're like, okay, how the hell do we make some money back on here? Now
Correct.
we try and push variations to our customer to try and get some money back. We're trying to lowball or get the very lowest number back from our subcontractors, so we somehow end up with some margin. And so I guess if we have a starting point where people are coming to the table, customer, head contractor, builder, subcontractors, and everyone's going, how do we all make sure we have a win out of this project?
Correct. Absolutely.
And then using tools like Payapps to facilitate that communication in there. I can see how that would be exceptionally valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it. You've got the market squeeze, which is price going potentially down in market, which means they do have to sometimes go at zero margin to win the business. Then they've got that other squeeze, which is that piece at the back end. And I think in times gone by, it might have been just forcing an outcome, perhaps with a subcontractor. I think nowadays what we see is as we introduce efficiency into the process for them, we can help them both lower their cost of doing business, critically important. So see a margin uptick, obviously, that comes from that. And they're able to effectively collaborate all the way through the process rather than it being an event. It becomes something that becomes, contiguous. It's always on and always visible, which I think, removes risk, but creates opportunity for improvement as well.
And I think we regularly hear the statement, knowledge is power. I think
Yes,
in this instant, information is power as well,
it
and
is.
there's so much, so many points of angst that can be avoided if the parties involved have access to good information.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about insight. I like to use that term because there's data, but then how do you use that data to make decisions? Well, that's what insight's all about, isn't it? And I think those days of where you're sort of not quite sure what this progress claim is going to look like until you get it can mean your forecast accuracy is either great or not. So absolutely, knowledge is power, gives you predictability and the ability to forecast and be ready for any challenges that might occur.
Tony, I do want to talk about that new generation of construction leaders you're seeing, but
Absolutely.
before we go there, I wonder, would you be able to share an example, maybe of an organisation you've worked with, what you felt their environment, current state, relationships between builder and subcontractor were before you were able to put the Payapps system in place, and then what's been the outcome since you've been able to do that?
Sure. We've got about 100 builders on our platform across my part of the globe, which is Asia Pacific and Europe. And there's been a number of success stories which have been fantastic. Parkview Constructions in Australia has been one that's sort of benefited from going from manual processes into an automated process for them, not just creating efficiency, but also lowering cost of doing business, but creating increased satisfaction in the subcontractor base. I think Roberts as well is another one who I'd certainly highlight, where it created a sense of almost camaraderie between the stakeholders in the environment, where maybe less about the cost efficiency and more about their ability to have better working relationships throughout. Perhaps it was an onerous exercise. It mightn't have been adversarial. That's probably not the right word to say,
Sure.
but certainly in these organisations, you can see how things could go wrong potentially without having that nice contiguous method of collaboration. So there's just two good examples. There's numerous ones we can
Sure.
highlight and certainly give you
Yeah.
your listeners a bit more information on if you like. But
Yeah. I think
that's
what I was trying to get insight, Tony, is what are
yeah,
some of the common outcomes you get when you look to implement, the likes of a Payapps,
yeah,
and the maybe in summary, what I heard was it can help increase efficiency in the business,
yep.
it can help lower the cost of doing business, and probably most importantly, it can also really help improve and maintain great relationships between builder and subcontractor. Is that it?
Absolutely. And ultimately, we're here to help prevent those litigation and other sort of issues that can crop up from time to time. And so that ability to collaborate really effectively and have great communication can prevent those things.
Yeah.
So, I think whilst those two examples I used wouldn't have gone into that world, there have been numerous examples where organisations haven't been collaborating effectively, and you see litigation occur, and sometimes perhaps unnecessarily.
Yeah, a previous guest on the podcast operates at very much that litigation end,
Mm.
and certainly his view is that so much of this could be avoided if there was just better understanding, better information, better communication earlier in the process. That so much of this litigation, which is a no-win for anyone, right? You just end up spending a fortune on legal fees, and you normally don't get the amount of money you feel like you are owed, etc., etc. By being proactive around the start of the relationship, you don't end up in the litigation zone, so a whole lot better.
Correct.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. Let's talk this new generation of construction leaders. Uh, when I drive past construction sites these days, probably one of the most common things I see is people on smartphones or smart
Mm.
devices.
Yep.
I imagine there's a hybrid of things going on there. One, there's the employee that maybe should be actively working and is checking their Instagram feed or something. But certainly we also see, it's their probably more important than the hammer, figuratively now,
Yeah.
in terms of how you run a construction business. So share what your observations about what you're seeing with now people that are leaders in this zone and how much they're using digital tools to help run their business.
They certainly are. It's technology has become an enabler for many things, and no doubt those people checking their phones are probably listening to your podcast, actually, Ryan. So, I'm hoping they're gaining some great insight there. If you sort of step back a little bit and think about the evolution of most construction firms, often it was an individual who started in our trade, who built a business and, continues to often be involved in that business. And some we work with have been around 10, 20, 30 years, even longer. So you've got that generation of people coming through. They sometimes will have a view that says, what's worked for us in the past will work for us moving forward. That's fine. However, there are, as you say, that next generation who have gone through university, gained their degrees, but also part of their degree program has been usage of technology. Our platform and Payapps is involved in one of the universities from an education point of view, which I think is critically important. And it's about education around technology adoption and how it can create efficiency. So the newer generation are coming out of university and coming into these careers with almost a demand for technology to help them improve not just their own role and how they go about doing their role, but for the people around them. They're very, very cognizant of all the stakeholders involved in the construction ecosystem. They're very cognizant of the environment. They're very cognizant of many of the things that perhaps weren't thought about as much previously. And so that demand is strong. I can assure you, we often see many of our customers who may move between organizations, demanding usage of, technology platforms like Payapps because they've seen the benefit and how it can bring, a whole lot of efficiency and risk mitigation to their day. So, technology savvy, absolutely. The ability to work, in a mobile sense, absolutely. The fact that it's not written on a 2x4, it's actually written using a device of some kind, which is instantaneous and makes sense. Now, that's just one part of this. The other part will be then the mix of people, involved in construction. And, I'm in another part of my life, I work within, the world of homelessness and support charities involved in homelessness. But, I often speak at schools and I ask people to close their eyes and think about what does homelessness look like. I think if you did the same thing in construction and you said to average person on the street, close your eyes and tell me what construction looks like, you're probably going to see, it's probably a person, maybe typically a male in work pants, work boots, high visibility vest, and a helmet, for example. But the people involved in construction, it's an incredibly changing face. Over 40% of our users are female. So that gender change has been significantly important. A vast majority of organisations, as we know, are small subcontracting organisations. They might be 1, 2, or 3 people, not 50, not 100. And so because they've got small organisations trying to get a great result for people, they have to use something to help them be more effective and efficient. So technology becomes an obvious choice there. So you've got not just the I guess the youth and new generations coming through in the workforce, and I think we're at 5 generations in the workforce now, from memory when I think about it. So from some of us a bit more mature in our careers, right through to those that are coming through brand new. So you've got multi-generations, demand for technology. You've got different people who are coming to construction from different backgrounds, and then you've got the gender balance now that's changing as well, which is all sort of adding up to how do we help them and how do we give them a great experience in their work life, but also then how do we help them give their customers a great experience as well. And I firmly believe technology is one of the enablers of doing that.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a changing face of not all construction, but certainly some construction businesses where they can be quite large organizations in the construction sector responsible for significant amounts of building, and yet they don't employ any builders because
Yes.
they subcontract their bit out. And we have
Yeah.
a great example of a very large residential home builder that we do a lot of work with. They have circa kind of 40 people in their team. Not one of them is a builder.
Yeah.
They are a business that is in the construction sector. They build homes, but they use a lot of technology. They use a lot of planning. They do managing that whole supply chain piece, so that the builders that they subcontract to can just get on and do the building, because
Yeah,
they're taking care of
absolutely.
all that other bit in the background.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's quite the shift in the market when you start thinking about having significant construction companies that don't actually employ any builders.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's more and more, I think you'll see that, back to my premise around technology being an enabler, that you will see that demand become stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, it's not going to replace at all what people currently do, for sure, but it will help them certainly, be more efficient, more effective in doing so. We've seen that, we'll use the analogy of the car, and we're still driving petrol cars, and whilst electric vehicles are becoming more and more common, we've still got a ways to go, sort of thing. So I see that as a technology that's perhaps helping to not replace, but probably evolve. How we drive and how we experience road travel and so on.
Mm. Yeah, adoption takes time, doesn't it?
It does.
Even
It
with great
does.
ideas, adoption takes time.
Yeah, and
And
but sorry, there was one of the, as I said it right at the start, where often some of these larger companies get accused of not being technology adopters. There's, whilst I can't name some of them, there's some fabulous examples of construction firms, large, medium, and small, who have embraced technology in some form to create a far better experience for their customers, and they pride themselves on doing so. And my challenge to them is to make sure we're telling people that. I think part of my job is always around education. It's around awareness, and it's not just for who we are and what we do at Payapps. It's about the industry and how the industry is changing. And I think it's changing and evolving quite rapidly, especially in the last 2 years, because I think COVID has forced people to think differently about how we do things, and it's sometimes not a bad thing.
absolutely, yep. Never waste a what's the saying? Can't quite land it. Never waste a challenge. No, there's some kind of saying that says, along the lines of, when something like a pandemic
Yeah,
comes through and forces change into your environment, don't waste it. Think about how we can be better and do things more effectively and efficiently,
yep, absolutely.
and then carry that forward, even though the pandemic will pass.
It will, and we'll move on, and we'll be what's the new normal going to look like? That's been my attitude for pretty much the most of it. I have to say that for 2 years I've managed through COVID, and sometimes it can be quite fatiguing. It's a very important and passionate thing for me, which is around mental health in the construction industry in particular, and I think that's very topical. When we talk about things like COVID and how we ensure that people are engaged and able to be connected, and but we will change. You and I are talking on video at the moment, and I've spent my life in the last 2 years on video, every hour of the day, sort of thing. Often that would have been as much as possible in person. And I said at the start, I really like to be doing things in person where possible, but we've adapted, and
Correct.
our business has still prospered.
Hmm.
And so adapt, move. That's got to be the mantra.
Yep, spot on.
Sorry, I was preaching a bit there, but there we go.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's very valuable. And Tony, if people wanted to learn more about Payapps and how systems like this can influence their business, what's the best way for them to get info on that?
Payapps.com, absolutely. That's one of the best examples. And hit the button. Contact us for more information, and we'll happily respond and come back to you immediately.
Okay, that's great, Tony. And if people were going, oh, I just really want to connect with Tony, I want to learn more from
Yep.
his great knowledge, how can people connect with you
Link,
directly?
LinkedIn's typically the best,
Hmm.
or you can get me at tony.simonsen@payapps.com.
Okay.
I'm responsive to all of those things.
Great. We will put a couple of those links
Yeah,
into
maybe
the show
pop them
notes
up
as
in the
well.
podcast. Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
So people can access in there. That's great. Tony, any closing thoughts that we maybe haven't covered that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
I think actually what I'll give you a compliment, right? I think what you're doing is fabulous. I've long held the view that education is absolutely critical, and it doesn't matter what industry it's in. It's about how it can help educate the industry to improve and do things differently and better. And I think formats like this go a long way to doing that. We all want to raise awareness, obviously, for what our companies do, but as much as we want to do that, we also want to help, rise the level of not just competence, but experience and knowledge within the industry. So I think well done on that. You've done a great job of that, and I'd love to continue to be part of it with you.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate those thoughts. And
Okay.
I, for one, will certainly be keen to have a look at that research report that you guys have put together. I think some of the insights about how you're thinking about the workplace of the future,
Yep.
certainly one of them in there was around how the needs and requirements of employees are changing.
Yep.
And that's certainly something we spend a lot of time thinking about, in that how do you lead people now and into the future, and how do you do that more effectively? So I, for one, will be digging into that report to learn some more.
Great. Excellent. Well, I'll look forward to your feedback around it.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Look, really appreciate you joining on the podcast today. Thank you for being so open with your insights and bringing some, really valuable understanding, I think, for how organisations like Payapps are helping to build the construction workplace of the future. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.